Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Corporal Jeanette McNeely. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From Victoria, Devonish Primary School and St Bridget's School, Gisborne. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lance Corporal Edward Kingston Garratt. Edward Garratt was born in Sydney in 1893, the youngest son of Samuel and Elizabeth Garratt. He grew up in the suburb of Lewisham and attended nearby Kegworth Public School. After leaving school, Edward worked as a plasterer. In October 1915, Garratt enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force and began his preliminary training in Australia. He sailed on the transport ship Aeneas in late December. By the time he arrived in Egypt, the Australians had withdrawn from the Gallipoli Peninsula, so Garratt went directly into the Australian Army training camp near Cairo, where he joined the 18th Australian Infantry Battalion. Soon after arriving in Egypt, Garratt fell ill, but he had recovered in time to accompany the 18th Battalion to France at the end of March 1916. In May, he fell ill again, this time more seriously. Suffering appendicitis, he was transferred to hospital in England and remained there until late November. He returned to his unit in France and spent the bitter winter of 1916 and 1917 in trenches and behind the lines. In March 1917, Garratt was promoted to the rank of Lance Corporal. He was a Lewis gunner in charge of a team that used the light machine gun in his company. This important role put him at risk of drawing the enemy's fire during battle. In May that year, the 18th Battalion took part in the Second Battle of Bullecourt, and Garratt was wounded in the leg. After a short stay in hospital, he returned to his unit. In June, his rank reverted to private as a punishment for 2 days of absence without leave. By September, though, he was again promoted to Lance Corporal. During the winter of 1917 and 1918, Garratt had leave in England and was hospitalised again with illness. When he returned to his unit in mid-March 1918, the 18th Battalion was in the thick of defensive fighting. The German army had launched what would be its final major assault of the war, which became known as the German Spring Offensive. A key objective for the German forces in this attack was to capture the rail hub city of Amiens, and in doing so split the British forces in the north from their French allies in the south. British and Australian forces managed to halt the offensive in April at the town of Villers-Bretonneux, less than 30 kilometres from Amiens. Garratt and the 18th Battalion were stationed at the town to help stop the German advance. In the first week of April, the 18th Battalion was in the front line at Villers-Bretonneux, during which time the men were targeted by German artillery and machine gun fire. At the end of the week, the unit was relieved, and the men moved to billets in the small village of Dantal behind the front lines. The village's civilian population had evacuated in the face of the fighting, so there was plenty of straw for the men to sleep on, had their first decent sleep in over a week. At 6 a.m. the next morning, 9th of April 1918, the men were awoken by a German artillery barrage falling on the village. The farmhouse in which Garratt was sleeping was hit by a shell, and he was killed instantly. Survived by his parents of 5 siblings, brothers Sam, Percy and Will, sisters Emma and Lily. He was just 25 years old. Edward Garratt's remains were buried in Villers-Bretonneux Military Cemetery, where they lie today alongside over 2,100 Commonwealth soldiers from the First World War. His family suffered further pain when the package containing his personal effects was lost. It was bound for Australia on the steamship Barunga when the ship was torpedoed by a German submarine off the coast of Cornwall in July 1918. British destroyers were on the scene and managed to rescue all that were aboard, but the personal effects of Garratt and about 5,000 other Australian soldiers who had died on the Western Front were lost. Edward Garratt is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right amongst more than 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lance Corporal Edward Kingston Garratt, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.